A lot of criticism around gacha stories sound emotional. People say the story is loose, padded, boring, or that nothing is happening. I don't think that's the full picture. I think what people are reacting to is how stories are delivered in gachas, not necessarily what those stories are. This isn't a spoiler discussion, and it's not about whether a specific patch was good or bad. This is about story structure, and why certain frustrations keep showing up across gacha games. Gachas don't tell stories the way finished games do. Gachas have one main problem to solve when it comes to storytelling. Everything comes in patches. That means every patch needs to solve several problems at the same time. It needs to be understandable on its own. If I don't remember exactly what happened before, can I still follow along? It needs to connect to the larger story. Does this inform past events? Does it set something up that makes me want to come back? And it needs to sell the current character. Do I like this character enough to pull? Gacha stories aren't designed to be consumed in one go. They're designed to be returned to. Most gacha stories are pulled between two different narrative needs. On one side, you have the world story, the state of the world, major factions, villains, and the resources being fought over. In Zenless, this would be things like PubSec, TOPS, or Persalumax. These are long-term, abstract elements that need to be introduced and curated across many patches. On the other side, you have current stories, which in gacha are almost always the current banner's character story. These are smaller, emotionally driven arcs. They're easy to understand, self-contained, and designed to make us care about the characters. The problem is that these two modes of storytelling naturally clash. Learning why Hollow Zero exists isn't emotionally engaging, no matter how important it is. Learning that Ishwan lost her sister definitely is. When players feel like nothing is happening, it's often because their attention is being pulled in both directions. We don't get dense, satisfying lore progression, and we don't get a fully focused emotional story either, because our brains keep switching modes. This isn't a problem with one bad patch. It's a balancing act that happens every patch, and it can't be fully solved. From the developer side, this isn't a question of what story they want to tell. It's a question of what fits. Time isn't infinite. Live service development forces decisions months in advance. Sometimes, a character the team believed in doesn't resonate with players. But the train doesn't stop. That patch still has to ship. That's the cost of live service. Changing direction is rarely possible. Writing, voice acting, animation, and localization all lock things in early. What we see as players isn't the full story. It's what survived the cutting room floor. Because of this, developers often choose safer stories. Stories that stand on their own and don't require too much narrative homework from the audience. We can see this tension clearly in Zenless. Early on, Zenless used a dual-track approach, a main story that advanced the world, and optional videotapes that focused on individual characters. If you wanted to learn about Soldier 11, you could engage with her story directly. If you wanted to learn more about New Eridu, you went to the main story. This created some problems. Players weren't always sure if the stories were connected, or what order they should be playing in. Sometimes they experienced them out of sequence. It also meant development time was spent on characters many players didn't care about. But this system had one major advantage. The stories could be tight, focused narratives, tailored to the moment when the player chose to engage with them. Eventually, Hoyoverse changed this approach and merged both modes into a single story track. This solved some real problems. Story order became clear, and every minute of narrative content was meant to be seen by every player. That clarity mattered, but it introduced a new challenge. What happens when the player doesn't care about the specific character being featured? Now, emotional character beats and broader world developments share the same narrative space. Sometimes an emotional moment is interrupted by geopolitical setup. Other times, major world developments pause so we can spend hours resolving a personal issue. Nothing here is filler, but players don't care about everything in the same way. Before, players chose which mode they wanted. Now, that switch happens dynamically. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't, everyone feels it. This is where gachas fundamentally differ from most other games. No patch is allowed to resolve everything. Each patch needs to close enough threads to feel satisfying, while leaving enough open to make players want to return. Ideally, next patch, not a year later. That means every patch needs connective tissue. Time is spent reorienting the player, and time is spent setting up future developments. Unresolved plot points are emotional stopping points, and when handled poorly, they break tension. Then there's monetization. Gachas are free to play, but they still need to make money. So the story has to help players connect with the characters, without feeling like an ad. Almost every patch is, at its core, about the current banner characters, even when it pretends not to be. And even when banner characters aren't important to the story being told, they still need to be present. That presence consumes narrative space. It adds elements that aren't strictly required, making stories less focused and less sharp. Ideally, every moment in a story pushes it forward. This constraint guarantees that isn't always possible. None of this means gachas need to change fundamentally, but delivery can be better. Character stories and main story beats should have their own moments. If intertwining them doesn't reinforce both sides, they should be separated into clean acts. Learning about the world isn't the same emotional experience as learning about someone's trauma. They shouldn't compete for attention. This isn't about telling less story. It's about respecting how people emotionally process stories. If a moment is meant to be emotional, let it build and resolve. If a moment is meant to explain the world, don't interrupt it to buy ice cream. A lot of frustration with gacha storytelling isn't about quality. These games tell great stories. It's about delivery. Once you understand the constraints, ongoing structure, monetization, mandatory presence, the patterns become clear. The solution isn't radical change, it's cleaner framing. That's often what separates a great patch from a mediocre one. Not what was said, but how it was said.